Welcome. This will be my completely spoiler-free review of the 2004 Sci-Fi Channel miniseries 5 Days to Midnight, stylized with a F, with the F being the number 5. So I guess it's 5 Days to Midnight. The show, I want to say, is rated TV-14. Certainly this video will be. If you would like to hear my spoiler discussion of some of the episodes, yeah, I have made those as well, and I kind of love this show. I know it's so cheesy and corny. I don't know, occasionally Sci-Fi Channel, Sci-Fi Network, whatever, does get it right. This, I think, is probably my favorite thing. I don't know if I can remember. I think there's at least one other thing that I watched of theirs where I was like, that's pretty good. But other than that, some of the stuff I've watched of theirs is just not super good. But of course, I don't really need to tell you that. What I mean is not even so bad it's good. Good. And I should say that, unfortunately, on this particular viewing, this is like my fourth. While I was able to watch the entirety of episodes 1, 4, and 5 of the 5 Days to Midnight, I was only able to watch the first 7 minutes of episode 2 and none of episode 3. Yes, I tried skipping around the episodes, simply would not play. I think maybe there's something about the DVD. I think it might have been dropped or something, but yeah. So what I will say is based on the 3 episodes and 7 minutes that I watched this time, and as far as I recall, it is accurate to the remaining 2 episodes. So I'm going to start with the writing here. The setup is one of those wonderful elevator pitches. Basically, physics professor J.T. Neuermeyer receives evidence that supposedly he will die within 5 days. And he has to try to find a way to prevent it and figure out, like, who even, like, he sees a list of suspects and it's like, well, none of those make sense except for this one name that he doesn't know yet, but someone else in his life does seem to recognize that name. And yeah, that's basically it. And there is some exploration of, predestination versus free will. You have stuff about, like, well, if you knew something was going to happen, would you be able to stop it? And at least one character in this raises the question, should you stop it, or do you need to let it happen the way that it, And yeah, it is not the most challenging sci-fi out there, but it's fun and it knows what it is. And yeah, I found all 5 episodes really engaging, and I was never bored. Psychological accuracy, authenticity, and level of detail are good, perhaps not amazing, but considering, yeah, once again, Sci-Fi Channel, it is better than some of their other stuff. And yeah, I personally really appreciated how this kind of explores mourning. Like, there is, we see some of the stages of grief. It's been a little too long since I watched for me to say for sure if it's all 5 stages, but that would make sense with 5 days, but yeah. And the tone, I already mentioned, fairly corny and cheesy at times. Yeah, in a way it feels like soap opera sci-fi. So, certain parts of Star Trek and Star Wars, with less expensive special effects than Star Wars. And, it's better than the oldest Star Trek. Did that sound dismissive? I really don't mean it to be. Merely descriptive. But yeah, it really makes the most out of the concept. And this is one of those cases where sometimes you'll watch a miniseries and it's like, this is a meeting that should have been an email. I mean, a miniseries that should have been a movie. That wasn't really the case here. Like, they make good use of the time. Like, hypothetically, you could do this as just, a feature film. It would lose a lot. Like, the episodes are around 40 minutes, so, you can do the math. It is more than what you would get from a feature film as far as running time goes. And I would say it never really felt like it was wasting my time, which, sometimes miniseries, there will be like padding and such. And again, been years since I watched 2 of the episodes, but from what I recall, they do not have padding. And the dialogue, like other aspects of the writing, are nicely utilitarian. I really appreciated how much this does of setup and payoff. Like, there's not really any wasted words, wasted effort in general. Like, it's not going to click for absolutely everyone, but I think, I mentioned I described the elevator pitch. I think if that is appealing to you, you're probably going to enjoy this. And the, just, every scene will accomplish something or other. I will acknowledge there is one character in this who speaks so much in expository dialogue at times, not exclusively, that I did wonder if maybe there was some kind of time travel and he got the script from the Netflix reboot or something, with just spelling out stuff that didn't really need to be. Yeah. The direction is quite good. It never really loses track. There's a lot of elements in play here, and it hits the ground running. Like, it immediately sets up stuff that will, be important later. And it's one of those things where, it actually starts with, showing us the thing that will happen if nothing changes. And basically then we go into, CSI time travel paradox discussion mode and try to figure out, who did this and why, and is there a way to prevent it. And the cinematography, whilst it's a choice to use as much, I want to say it's called frame skipping. It's not quite slow motion as it does. I don't know. I found it very endearing. Yeah. I mean, it tends to work fine, and it is a cheap way to, which Sci-Fi Channel, cheap way to increase, drama and tension and suspense and such. And those are things this does tend to do rather well at. And yeah, cinematography and editing is never less than competent, if not always spectacular, but considering the budget, they do a good job. And yeah, as far as editing goes, I really appreciate how much they really must have just trimmed this down. I don't know if that was editing room or writing stage, but there's no excess on this, I would argue. Again, from what I recall, that is true of the 2 episodes that I wasn't able to rewatch recently. And I think that does pretty well cover. Yeah, so production value is about what you'd expect, but they do manage to fit in a couple of things that look expensive. It is obviously a show where you have to take it on its terms. If you're watching it for the first time now, yeah, it's 22 years old and was made by this, you know, TV network that don't have as much money as enthusiasm at times. The set design, locations, costumes, and makeup are all good. They help convey things about the characters. You know, you'll see where someone lives, where someone works, stuff like that, how they dress, the yeah, stuff like that. The music is wonderfully yeah, it can get a little big, you know, but yeah, it works. It gets you really into it, in my opinion. And the sound design is quite good. There's a couple of elements where they really, you know, they appreciated, okay, we gotta make this memorable because the visual effects are not groundbreaking, you know, and I'm not, like, obviously, it would be silly to judge it by 2026 standards. I'm judging it by 2004 standards. You know, this came out 1 year after X-Men 2. You know, there were better special effects around this time, but they cost money, and that was not really something they could accomplish here. But yeah, the sound design tends to help really make up for that, and I don't think there's any shame in that. You know, I unabashedly love the, I would say, 2019 live-action Valhalla movie, and that one is also very much the sound design. You know, the CG is minimal, if not bad. You know, the characters, there's just enough there. Like, I got a sense of who everyone was from, you know, interactions, and maybe sometimes you'll see someone by themselves, see what they do, and yeah, conveys a lot. And yeah, I genuinely found myself sitting through this just wondering, like, who did or will do this murder, you know, and why? And yeah, meeting these characters, and just there's just enough variety to them that they don't feel, you know, there's at least one character where you're like, that's the killer though, right? And you find yourself wondering, wait, is that, maybe it's a red herring because it's a little too obvious, you know, and you find yourself really thinking, like, why are some of these characters even suspects? You know, like, there's no way that they would do this. And yeah, like, you really, it gets you really theorizing, you know. And yeah, I think that does cover that element. Yeah, the acting is good, sometimes great. There is at least one character who is perhaps overacted, but it fits that character. You know, like, obviously you don't have to like that. You don't have to think that, you know, some people cannot abide by overacting. I'm of the opinion that it depends entirely on what we're seeing them overact in. And here, like, I never felt like someone was overacting. Like, there was at least one time where I was like, is this where we get overacting from this character? And it wasn't. Even though that would have, like, they could have gotten away with it, but it wouldn't have been as impactful. And honestly, the fact that most of them, it's not really overacting. It's not the most subtle acting either, but again, it's good. Even, you know, there's, you know, a child character, she does well. She, you know, she's asked to do more than a lot would be able to at that age, and she acquits herself really well. And to be clear, I try not to judge child actors and teen actors and such. I blame the adults who, you know, if not necessarily push them into, at the very least, didn't, like, stop and say, listen, I'm sorry, I don't think this is working. This is just not that good of a performance, you know. But yeah, I think, and it is very important because it's actually the the character is Jessie, the daughter of protagonist JT, and part of what's going on is he is terrified of orphaning her because her mother already died. and he is not married, what would even happen with her, you know? And it works really well that the relationship between them, like, I will acknowledge at times can kind of get saccharine, but it also does feel real. Like, you know, he's a genius and she is approaching that, you know. There's actually this great kind of visual metaphor where they're solving a jigsaw puzzle that I'm going to be brutally honest here, I don't think I'd ever get through, because it's one of those where you can't really see, like, there's a huge chunk of it that's the same color, you know, so even if you use the box and try to find out based on that, you know, yeah. And this puzzle, at least one point, actually kind of functions as a visual metaphor of, you know, are they going to be able to solve the actual, you know, how close are they to solving what's actually, you know, this potential murder of JT. But yeah, you know, we see father and daughter together, and, you know, clearly there's a lot of love there, and yeah, it's just really, you know, you watch this and you're like, there has to be some way for him to survive all 5 days. You know, yeah. And if her acting was just bad, or if the writing really failed her, that would simply not work. And so the cast, you know, McFadden, you know, is wonderful here. The others, I was positively surprised by Randy Quaid. I have to admit, I have not watched. I know. I have not watched I want to say they're called National Lampoon Vacation movies, but I've seen clips. You know, I'm aware that he, at least for a while, at least for a chunk of his career, was known primarily as this comedy sidekick goofball, and here he plays it straight. It never felt like I'm watching a comedian who's really struggling. Like, he really embraced the seriousness here. She is a homicide detective, you know, and you can easily see how that could be completely ruined if we cannot take him seriously as that. And yeah, it was very cool seeing the Esri Dax actress, Nicole DeBoer, if that's how you pronounce that. You know, it's really this DS9, or Star Trek Deep Space Nine for the uninitiated. And see, I am into at least some Star Trek. I freaking love Deep Space Nine. But yeah, these two and then the first Cube movie are really the only things I think that I've seen her in. But she's, yeah, genuinely really, really talented. And it is it's be sitting down if you watch this and you know of at least some of the most prominent stuff Gianmarco Soresi has done, because it is, at first I didn't even recognize him, you know. It's yeah, but he's also really, really, really good here. And it definitely doesn't feel like anyone is just doing it as a paycheck. Like, it comes across as if everyone wanted to be here and wanted to do their very best to really make it work. The pacing is quite good, neither rushing nor dragging. I already mentioned it's never boring, but it's also, I never felt like, okay, this is just going too fast, you know. And yeah, so these special effects, they did try to make it practical where that was indeed practical. There are a couple of places where they just have to do it with CG, and it does not look that good. And it is fascinating to me when they make stuff like this and they don't stop and think, you know what, is it possible that we rewrite this? Because, like, this is not going to look, you know, and it's actually one of the very first things we see is CG during the, you know, the murder flash forward, I guess, dream. But yeah. And but I did not think that it ruined it. But obviously, you know, if you need to be constantly And then I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but if you are someone who feels, okay, I have to be able to buy everything I see, you know, this is not gonna work for you because of that. So yeah, as far as sci-fi goes, I thought it struck a good balance. I'm many times wary of this thing of like, so, okay, you want to tell a sci-fi story, but we want to tell it in present day, so there's not going to be that much, sci-fi stuff in there, but we can still have like discussions and such, that can feel like, okay, that's a cop-out. I'm when I sit down for sci-fi, I tend to want something that is like all in. This is one of those cases where I'm actually like, you know what, this works. This really does, yeah. Right, I should say there's at least one special effect where I watched it and I was like, um, did the characters get a sense of the thing that we just saw? Because they don't seem to be reacting so much to it. And it's, they kind of had to do something there. You might know it when you see it, and if not, I discuss it in my spoiler videos, but yeah. Right, it was also, as far as acting goes, I gotta mention Hamish Linklater, who, like, I think it's just this and Legion that I've seen him in, but in both of these, he is so incredible as this just quirky weirdo, but they're also two incredibly different characters, and I don't know if that's just what he always plays, or is just when I happen to see him in something, that's what he plays, but yeah. And Timothy Hutton does do a really great job as the lead. And yeah, so as mentioned, I believe it's TV-14. It certainly does not push that far. There is a little bit of stuff, there is a murder and you do see the body and such, but it's not like super violent. And I think that was the right choice. Honestly, I would not rule out, when this first streamed, some of the people who loved it the most were like fathers of teen daughters and the teen daughters and their fathers, watching it and being like, oh, just like us kind of thing. And yeah, it does a good job as far as, I am someone who likes to watch things that are leftist, not conservative in politics. And yeah, I mean, there's stuff about how some people are just not listened to as much, including sometimes children, girls, but also how competent they can be under the right circumstances. And yeah, in general, the way that it, handles the, there's some feminist stuff going on here in a way that I thought really worked. I'm sure, I don't know if the grift. I think this is probably not a big enough deal that the YouTube grifter chuds would, complain about it, but I'm sure they'd find something to insist was somehow bad. Even, yeah, it is not really like aggressively about. It is one of those pieces of feminist media where men are not incompetent. It's just that women also are important and help and make the world a better place, just like in reality. I don't think I have a very specific appropriate YouTube video to recommend, so I will just say that I quite enjoyed Rebecca Watson's, the Skepchic's video on, let's see, I think it's called, I'm afraid my wrists are too sore to check right now, but it's something along the lines of magnetic bands will not protect you from shark bites. And yeah, I can't help but think today, I don't think we need help from the future in order to stop ICE from killing people. That is merely political will and sufficient nonviolent resistance. And I think that might just about cover. So I must briefly mention, there is, on at least one occasion, there is a bit where someone is figuring something out and the camera literally moves 360 degrees around them as computations are, surrounding them, take over the background and such. And like on the DVD, they straight up say, I mean, yeah, we beautiful mind it, it's that's what we're doing here. And it is so wonderfully corny, and it just like, yeah, if this is just very much a miniseries where if you're the right kind of, if you're in the mood for it, if you're the right kind of audience for it, it's really going to hit, and that's not true of every, there's a lot of pieces of media out there where no matter how much you are, you know, ready to watch a certain thing, it's just not quite gonna work for you, I really thought, let's see, I think it's called Double Team, Jean-Claude Van Damme, and I do not remember what the guy's called, but pretty sure it's called Double Team. Let's see if I can see it from here to confirm, because I can definitely recognize the... No, I think it is behind some other DVD on my shelf. Anyway, Nostalgia Critic made it sound fun, so I was hoping it'd be fun. It's the Cybermonk movie, and I'm still a fan of Van Damme. I'm not making excuses for it. I know some of the stuff he's said is pretty ridiculous, but I tend to be entertained watching his movies. I think that is the one time I watched a Van Damme movie and I was just kind of bored, and I really thought I was in the right mood for it because, again, watched Nostalgia Critic. That was back when I liked Nostalgia Critic. I don't know what I was thinking. But yeah, I will admit I'm slightly grading on a curve here, but hopefully the review itself has helped you get an idea of whether or not this is your kind of thing. I rate this 7 days to try to solve a future homicide and explore what it even means to know just enough about the future to really be able to, maybe change things, but also just too little to be confident that you will indeed be able to prevent. Yeah. Out of the murder, out of 10.